Hello, Malcolm here, and welcome to Tuesday Teaching Tips, episode 195. And today we're talking about 3 areas of focus for teaching. 3 areas, the 3 key areas for healthy church life and for us to consider as to whether we are focused in the right ways or on the right things in regards to our teaching. What should we be focusing on? So we're going to talk about that today. First of all, though, just to say, I'm back from San Antonio, where I've been for a conference of Bible teachers, the Conversations Conference, my little name tag thing there, which had me down as being from Hertz. I think Hertfordshire was what it was meant to say on there. Nonetheless, wonderful time, super catching up with old friends, some I hadn't seen for a couple of decades. Thank you so much to Dave Proctor and everybody else who organised it. I'm very, very grateful. John Oakes for telling me a lot about it in advance. Thank you very much. And thanks to the Mission Point Church in San Antonio for providing a lot of the logistical support and help. It was great to worship with you on Sunday. So that was wonderful. And lots of good lessons have come from the classes I attended and the conversations I had. More on that as we go forward in the next little while. I certainly learned enough material and came across enough material to supply perhaps 10 or 20 of these teaching tips. So they'll feed in as we go along. But today I'd like to focus on really just one point made in the first class, which was taught by Ronald Rolheiser, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now, Ronald Rolheiser, he's a Catholic priest. He's the president of the Oblate School of Theology in San Antonio, where we were for a good part of the weekend. He's a well-known writer on spirituality. In fact, I have one of his books on my Kindle, which is called Sacred Fire, A Vision for Deeper Human and Christian Spirituality. I'm going to put the link to that in the show notes. And now that I've actually heard him speak in the flesh, I am now more motivated and spurred on to read the rest of his book. I bought it a while ago on the recommendation from somebody else, read a bit, and then just dropped it. And I'm sorry I did that, Ronald. Sorry about that. But I'm now going to pick it up and finish it as one of my resolutions. And so I really enjoyed listening to Ronald. Now, the title of his class was Teaching and Spirituality. So putting these two things together, teaching and spirituality. It was a terrific lesson. He covered, as an example, some of the things he covered, how to hear God's voice, the 3 levels of spirituality, which we'll talk about another time, the role of academic theology and church life, how that fits together, what happens when academic theology is shut out of the church, but also what happens when academic theology does not respect the church. And he covered a lot more than just that, all in about 45 minutes, which is very impressive. So it's tough picking out just one thing to talk about for today, but I'm going to focus on a fundamental issue he covered at the beginning of his talk, and it concerns the 3 levels or areas of teaching for healthy church life and Christian practice. So summarized, they are these. Number 1, teaching to bring people to the faith. In other words, helping those who are lost and far from God to come to the Christian faith and become Christians. So teaching to bring people into the faith. Secondly, teaching to help people grow in their faith. So this is people of Christian faith, helping them be edified and equipped, growing in their faith, expressing their faith, living out their faith for their benefit, the people around them, and those who are saved and those who are lost. And the third area, or the third focus, is teaching within the academic sphere, which then can help develop an understanding of what faith is and what the faith is, such that then it deepens those who teach people who are Christians and can help deepen people who teach those who are not yet Christians. So 3 areas: teaching people to bring people to the faith, teaching people of faith to grow in their faith, and teaching within the academic sphere so that we can understand the faith in deeper and more complete ways to be able to then pass it on to others. Now, I want to expand on that a little bit about what I think that means for me and perhaps the churches that I'm involved in. I'm not sure I'm going to do Ronald justice. So, Ronald, I apologize if I miss some things out. I don't fully grasp all of your points. But my takeaway, amongst other things, from thinking about these 3 areas of focus in teaching is to consider where my strengths and my weaknesses lie. And in doing so, to consider whether I'm growing in my weaker areas, but also whether I'm really fully exploiting my strengths. See, all three aspects of teaching are vital, aren't they? We can easily see how a focus on one area to the exclusion of the others would lead to a terrible, tragic imbalance. If all we do is teach people how to become Christians, if that's really our exclusive focus, then we'll have congregations full of spiritual infants. They may be around for many years, but they won't really grow. And that seems to be the problem addressed by the writer to the Hebrews, who says, you should be teachers by now, but they're still infants. There seems to be not enough emphasis on edifying and growing those Christians. That's one problem. Secondly, though, if our exclusive focus is on teaching congregation members to grow in their faith, we can end up with a self-focused group. That's not how it should be, but it can be. And then they run the risk of missing out on the heart of God and on losing their concern for those who are lost and far from God. Seems to be something demonstrated by the Pharisees. For example, Luke 11, verse 42. So we want to avoid those two extremes of exclusive areas of focus, but also we need to avoid the third area becoming an exclusive focus, because diving ever deeper into academic understanding of faith without finding the relevance for those who are lost or the members of the church leads to a stale intellectualism. Perhaps Paul had something like that in mind when he writes to the Colossians. You'll have to look that up, Colossians chapter 2, verses 18 and 19. So we want to avoid the extremes of exclusivity of any one of these areas. If we want healthy spirituality and a healthy congregation, we must invest in all three aspects of teaching. We've got to equip those people who can teach in these three areas and provide channels so that these three aspects of teaching can be a blessing to non-believers and to Christians and to congregations, everybody, basically. So the reflection I have as it pertains to me, at least myself personally, is that the second of these three areas is my greatest strength. And I'm capable of teaching people how to become Christians. I can do that. I'm okay at that. And I'm okay and capable of engaging to a certain level with academia. I've studied at the Oblate School of Theology, and so I'm capable in that area. But it's the second area that's my strength. At least that's what people tell me, and I think it's true. Most people would say that of those three areas, my greatest strength is helping people who are already convinced of the Christian faith in growing in it, deepening their faith, learning better how to express and live out their faith. So it's about edification. That's my greatest strength of the three areas. So from that, I have three convictions that I've been mulling over since hearing Ronald talk. Firstly, it's important that I focus on exploiting my strength, not lamenting my weaknesses. I would love to be better at teaching people how to become Christians. In other words, not just teaching them the facts, but really making it compelling. I'd love to be better at that. And I'd love to be better at the academia, at being able to read more complex ideas and understandings of the faith and being able to understand it, assimilate it, synthesize it with all the other views and then bring that to other people helpfully. I'd love to be better at that. But it doesn't mean I should, the fact that I could be better at that doesn't mean that I should compromise my strength for the sake of lamenting my weaknesses. Oh, I'm not good at this, and I'm not so good at this, and not so good at this. I guess the thing I'm strong at, that's not so important. No, let me grow in these other two areas, but celebrate the fact that God has given me, by grace, the strength I have, and use it. So that's one thing I think is very important. But the second thing is, it is also important that I consciously and deliberately work at strengthening my weaker areas. Not, I believe, as the primary focus. The primary focus should always be to use to the full the strength God has given me. However, surely I can grow. To grow in the other areas needs some focus, needs some effort, and needs to be deliberate. So that's the second thing. But thirdly, it's important that I recognize the people around me who are strong in the areas where I am weaker. If I know people who are compelling at bringing the gospel to the lost, or who are gifted at the academia side, I mustn't distance myself from them or see them as less important or not engage with them, but instead say, I have my strength, you have your strength, let's work together and let me learn from you. And that's a humility issue in the end, isn't it? And that's something I need to wrestle with. So what does that mean in real life? My real life and what I think could be helpful for congregations. Well, I'm still working that out in its detail, and I would like your thoughts on all this. But some preliminary conclusions. What have I got? I've got 4 of them. 4 preliminary conclusions at least. Firstly, it's important that I accept that in most contexts, my sermons and lessons will be most effective when I conceive of them and deliver them as channels for people of Christian faith to grow in their faith. In other words, to do what I do best and not to worry about what's lacking. If I emphasize, if I celebrate what I've got, then that's fine. And so as I prepare a lesson, I need to think about those who are lost. Absolutely, of course. But I need to not be concerned about the fact that's not my strength. Instead, to make sure that I'm preparing lessons and studying and getting ready for lessons with the understanding and accepting the fact that I am going to be most effective at helping the members of the church here to grow in their faith and to be edified. And to accept that. Number 2, pay more attention to learning from those people who are especially effective at presenting the good news in a way that non-Christians find compelling. Listen, look online, watch YouTube, listen to podcasts, talk to people as I observe people teaching, just to really say, there must be something here for me to learn. What am I learning? And to be grateful for that. And so be more deliberate about that. Thirdly, to place myself in an academic environment frequently enough for my thinking to develop a deeper understanding of the faith, most likely engaging in some kind of formalized study. So that means reading books that challenge me intellectually. It means talking to people who have that academic ability. It means perhaps also doing some study. I am thinking, maybe not this year because of other things that are going on, but perhaps towards the end of the year or next year, is pursuing some more academic study. Perhaps back at London School of Theology where I studied before, perhaps somewhere else. But I think I need that stimulus. I don't need it all the time, and I need it to the level that I can handle, but I need something to make me think more rigorously about my understanding of the faith. So that's the third thing. And fourthly, important this, I think, to ensure that the congregations I serve, currently Watford and Thames Valley, have access to people who are able to teach, are gifted in all of these 3 areas. So if I'm more gifted at the edification, then who do we have in the Watford congregation or the Thames Valley congregations who are particularly gifted at compelling, at teaching in a compelling way for those who are not yet Christians, or who are gifted in the academic area more so than myself, and making sure the congregations get the blessing of being exposed to all 3 kinds of teaching and all 3 kinds of, or teachers with those kinds of gifts. I need to balance my strengths and weaknesses with those of other people who can bring what I lack. And where we don't have those in our congregations, and some congregations being smaller, like Watford, may not have people gifted in all 3 areas, then it's important that I bring in people from outside to plug those gaps, perhaps, or to bring a blessing to the congregation where currently perhaps I can't provide it in as much of the measure as would be good for the congregation and helpful. So who are we bringing in? Who are you bringing in? I mean, that's one of the questions for all of us to think about. If you have a responsibility for teaching in your congregation, which of these 3 areas is your strength? And where you have weaknesses, who are you bringing in? Either within the congregation, who are you bringing up, if you like, to the front to speak and teach? Or who, if you don't have that, who are you bringing in from somewhere else? Maybe it's from another congregation within our fellowships, but perhaps you need to think about, or perhaps I need to think about, bringing people even from outside of our fellowships, if they have the relevant gifts, to be able to teach our congregations and help in ways that perhaps you and I are not so gifted. So, some things for us to think about. Of course, in the end, Jesus is our model, isn't he? He was wonderfully gifted at helping those who are far from God to come close to the Father. He had the capacity to teach in such a way as to grow the faith of those who followed him and gathered around him. He certainly grasped and explained the deeper aspects of the faith with tremendous profundity. The Apostle Paul seemed to be good at all three as well. Now you and I'm sure we all want to be more like Jesus in all of these three areas. But I think we also need to be patient with ourselves and understand that the gifts that you and I have, the strengths that we have, are gifted from God. Let's celebrate those and use those the best we can. Not lament our weaknesses, but simply acknowledge them, grow in them, but also find ways to make sure that the congregations around us, the people around us, have blessings in all those three areas of teaching. Jesus isn't finished with us yet. He has the resources we need. So what I'd like to know today, I have three questions for today rather than just one. Firstly, which of the three areas I've outlined, and that Ronald Rolheiser outlined, which is your strength? Is it in bringing a compelling message to the lost? Is it in edifying the congregation? Is it in studying and thinking through the deeper academic, you could say, aspects of the faith and theology? Which is your strength? Secondly, how do you feel about developing your weaker areas? Do you have plans for that? And thirdly, what are your plans to strengthen your strength and to develop your weaknesses? And hey, anything else on this topic that's of interest to you, I'd love to know about. So please do drop a comment in the comment box. One last thought before we finish. I did get back just yesterday from the States, and I am still quite significantly jet lagged. So if I've said anything in this recording that makes no sense to you, I apologize, and I use the excuse of jet lag. However, I do hope it's been useful. I'm sure there's something in here for you, and I would love to know what you think about all these aspects of teaching and some questions that I've put out there. So do drop a comment in the comment box. Leave it publicly so that we can see it, so that we can learn from each other, because we learn best when we're learning, teaching one another in this community. If you know anybody who might benefit from this recording, please pass the link on. If you haven't already done so in YouTube, hit the notification button, subscribe buttons, and then you'll know about upcoming recordings as they come up and come out. And if you're listening to the podcast, please do me a favor and leave a podcast review. Star it up as high as you like, and it won't take you long. Just drop a short review in there. I'd be very grateful. Well, another teaching tip comes out in 2 weeks' time. I'll be reviewing and thinking through all the lessons from the conference I was at. And if you were there, or if you've heard from people who were there, I'd love to know what you think and what you've heard as well, because it was a terrific conference. I think it'll be a great blessing, I hope, to the congregations that I have connections with, but also broadly in our fellowships across the world. Until the next time, I hope you have a terrific Tuesday and a wonderful week. Take care, and God bless.